All right, I got a lot of Phillies stuff to dive into. 2.5 back, Nola Day on the mound. Scott Lauber from the Inquirer, Philadelphia Inquirer. How important, you tweeted this out a little while ago, Scott, how important is it for the Phillies to pick up a win on a day that Aaron Nola is on the mound with 6 starts left to go, 2.5 back?
Hugely important, Mike. Hugely important. There's kind of a reason why the Phillies decided to keep Nola every 5th day rather than giving him an extra day whenever they have an opportunity with a day off down the stretch. They want to maximize the number of starts he can make. And, it's hugely important that they win the games he pitches because we know how uncertain things are on the days when he doesn't pitch. When he does, Gabe Kapler said it last night, like when Nola pitches, you're probably going to, if you score 3 or 4 runs, you're probably going to win. When anyone else in the rotation pitches, usually that's not going to get it done. You're going to have to score more than that. So, I bring it up because I brought it up on Twitter because they've lost his last 2 starts through no fault of his. He's pitched well against the Mets and prior to that against the Marlins. They just didn't win those games. And it feels like a double whammy when you lose a Nola start because now you got to get through the next 5 days before you get back to him again. So it's hugely important. I'm putting it at 87, 88 wins that they're going to need to get the second wild card. The Cubs right now are on pace to win 88 games. That means you got to win 16 more. Nola's going to start 6 games. If you go 6-0 with Nola, I think that means they only have to go 10-9 in the other 19 starts made by other pitchers, and that's not crazy. It's probably doable. So, but if you go 4-2 or 3-3, well, now you got to play considerably above 500 with everybody else on the mound. So Nola starts are going to be huge for them down the stretch, and obviously that begins tonight in Cincinnati.
Yeah, Scott Lauber's with us here. Let me ask you, you're around, and are you noticing, I saw your colleague Marcus Hayes wrote the article about Charlie working with Hoskins and Kingery, and, there's no launch angle and exit velocity in these conversations. Are you noticing a different approach being around this team and just talking to these guys over the last, couple of weeks that Charlie's been here?
I haven't, I'll be honest with you, I haven't noticed anything incredibly dramatic. Look, I'm sure that it helps to have Charlie around. He has a way of communicating with players that's different from most other hitting coaches, especially the modern breed of hitting coaches. It's a little bit more, it's a little bit different in the way he breaks it down. I think you and I have talked about this. I've spoken to a lot of guys who played for Charlie in the past when he was a manager, and they all talk about positive reinforcement, and everything's positive reinforcement. And he has a way of making you feel good. And if hitting is about confidence and is about going to the plate thinking you're going to succeed, Charlie has a way of making you feel better about yourself than, let's say, a spreadsheet with numbers does. So I'm sure the delivery is different. The messaging is probably a little bit different. But I'll give you an example. Last night after the game, I saw a bunch of guys sitting around Rhys Hoskins' locker. There were about 5 of them. And they were looking at an iPad with video of some swings. And that's not Charlie firing up the iPad to show them anything. That's them doing it on their own. I think that there are guys, Rhys Hoskins included, who really like the data. They really like the information. They really like to know as much as they possibly can. And I don't think Charlie's filling them with information. I think he's helping them in other ways. Like I said, I think the messaging is different. I think that the delivery is different. But ultimately, I think, in 6 or 7 weeks, I think he can help a guy maybe get out of a slump a little faster. But I don't think he's changing anyone's approach or making any wholesale changes to what guys have been doing now for a few years.
Yeah, because in the story that Marcus wrote, it referenced Hoskins and specifically Kinger. He went opposite field last night, really drove the ball that way. And Kingery's a guy who got off to a hot start and he kind of cooled off. He really struggled last year. And now those two guys, for me, Scott, I said they're pitching. I just can't trust this pitching night in and night out. But I can see them winning games 6-5. They're pitching at least, keeps them in games. It's just that I can't trust them. But 6-5, 7-4, if their offense can give me more consistency, then I can buy in some more.
Right. And I don't think Charlie Manuel or John Maley or any other hitting coach is going to suddenly make Rhys Hoskins a less streaky hitter or Scott Kingery a less streaky hitter. What you're hoping is that they can minimize the bad streaks. They can make them shorter. And Charlie does have a way, like I said, I talked to, this was several weeks ago after Charlie came back. I talked to Chris Coast, if you remember, the backup catcher for so many years back in the days, when they were winning divisions and World Series. And, he was telling me that, look, he had a swing, if you remember, that was kind of an unorthodox swing. It was not a swing that you would tell a kid, hey, emulate this. And instead of trying to change him or instead of trying to make him into something different, Charlie just had a way about, making Chris Coast feel better about himself when he was in a bad slump and helping him to break it a little bit faster than maybe other hitting coaches he had during his career. A great hitter like Chase Utley tells a story about, being in a bit of a funk and, he rolls over another ground ball to second base and comes back to the dugout and he's beating himself up over it. And Charlie says, hey, you really just missed that one. You look really good on that one. And Chase is thinking, what are you talking about? I'm horrible right now. But, sometimes, when it sounds so basic and so easy and so simple, but sometimes just, a positive word to make you think you're closer than you are helps you get back and lock in faster. So, like I said, I think maybe the messaging is different and certainly the voice is different, but I don't know that, he's going to suddenly turn Rhys Hoskins into a less streaky hitter.
Scott Lauber from the Inquirer is joining us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Little Phil's 2.5 back against the Cincinnati Reds. Nola pitching today. Let me real quick. What happens with Charlie at the end of this? Is he enjoying this enough that he says, you know what, maybe I will hang around? And the team's responding. Do you sense anything has changed in the 3 weeks that he's been here?
I don't think so. I think if you asked him, I think he would remind you that he's 75. The day that he came back, I think in his little dugout meeting with us, in 10 minutes, he must have mentioned his age about 3 or 4 times. And so, listen, I know that they fly on charter airplanes and they stay in nice hotels, and it makes travel about as easy as it could possibly make it. But, when you're 75 years old, it's a bit of a grind. Heck, when you're 45 years old, it's a bit of a grind to get through a full season. So, no, I don't think that this is something that Charlie is yearning to get back to. Being around a team every single day and being on the road and the rigors of all that. I think he's perfectly happy to help out wherever he can, and he does enjoy being around players. I'll tell you that he does enjoy being around the batting cage, and he loves talking hitting. There's probably nothing he likes talking about more, but I don't know that he wants to do it every single day at his age, and. I'd be very surprised if, we're talking about it on opening day next year and he's their hitting coach or a member of their staff. I think that, if he can be a resource or a valuable asset, that'd be great. Maybe he's around the team a little bit more than he had been before, but I don't think he wants to do it on a day in, day out basis.
All right, Scott, this team. Oh, boy, here we go. A month left. They got Cincinnati. And Bryce said it in the on the television side last night when he was getting interviewed. Look, hey, let's try to win the series tomorrow and see if we can then sweep them out on what day is it today? Wednesday, Thursday. Then they got the Mets and the Braves. If they're going to get there, they're going to earn this, it seems like, with the schedule they got coming up.
Yeah, they are. I was just talking about this with somebody. We all look at the playoff odds, right? And the Phillies aren't being given much of a chance. I think it's been well under 10% now for a while.
I think it's like 5% is what I saw.
Yeah. And, you look at it and you say to yourself, why is that? Because, I certainly said this the other day, 2.5 games out with 25 to play, there's a lot crazier things that have happened than for a team to overcome a deficit like that. And it's not like they've got to climb over 12 teams. The Cubs are right in front of them and all of those things. But I think it's a combination. It's a really tough schedule. Not only are they playing good teams, a lot of games left with Atlanta and Washington and the Mets. they have to go to Cleveland, and they're in a playoff race over in the American League. But it's a lot of road games as well, so I'm sure that's a factor in all of this. People just don't trust their pitching. I'm sure that's a factor in all of this. And then I was watching television a little while ago, and MLB Network had up the Diamondbacks' remaining schedule, and they've got like 7 games left with the Padres, and they've got, at least 3, maybe 5 or 6 with the Marlins, and they've got the Reds a bunch of times, and it's a really much easier schedule than what the Phillies face. So I think that's why you see the odds as low as they are. But I don't think they're getting too caught up in that. I think you're right. I think what Bryce said last night is something that he said to us and to me recently, which is, you got to just, and it's cliche, of course, and you roll your eyes. You don't want to hear it. It doesn't make for sexy copy in the newspaper, but you play to win a series, and if you can win enough series, then you put yourself in a position at the end of the season to be right there. And I think that's what they're hoping for, is to just hang around. It's not like the Cubs are pulling away from anybody. They're not like on fire right now. So, if they can hang around, and if they can, like I said, win these starts that Nola makes and capitalize on that, and maybe they get Harper, Hoskins, and Realmuto hot at the same time, and they'll take a swing at this thing. So I don't think they're out of it. I do think the odds reflect, like I said, strength of schedule, all the road games, and the lack of trust in their pitching beyond Nola. But they are in a position where if they continue to win series, they can put a lot of pressure on the Cubs to keep winning, and that's really all that they can ask for right now, is to keep the pressure on the Cubs.
Okay. Now, Scott, over the years that you've talked to me, I ask a lot about younger players, right? I mean, I see guys all over baseball that are just, breaking out. The kid last night, Aquino, they had no idea who this guy was, and they found him, and he's having an unbelievable run for that team. And then you look at the Phillies, they still seem to have some reluctancy to that. And you look at these September call-ups. I mean, do you think that they should have called up some of these younger players at September and given them a shot to help this team? Is throwing Howard into the rotation a better option than what I watched last night?
Yeah, I see the arguments for and against. I really do. I think that, this as well as anyone, that, you call up a kid from a prospect in the minor leagues, especially late in the season in the middle of a pennant race, and it can have it can be like an injection of energy. It can really have a positive effect, and that there is something to be said for that. And then you hear the arguments against. The fact that Spencer Howard, who will be pitching tonight for Reading in the Eastern League playoffs, he's made 6 starts above Single A. They don't use the same baseball in Double A that they're using here. The Phillies have seen players like Damon Jones, other pitchers this year go from Double A to Triple A and really struggle when they get to use that, when they have to use that different baseball. These are all factors that come into play here. If it was me, I don't know. I think I would probably give it a shot. What do you have to lose? I wouldn't start him against, I wouldn't start him against the Red Sox or anything like that, but, or the Yankees, or, I wouldn't put him in a game like, like that. I wouldn't start him on Sunday Night Baseball against the Mets, but, I think that he's a guy who could probably go out there and give you every bit of what, you've been getting from some of these guys, be it Velasquez or Smiley or stuff like that. So I guess at this point I would probably give it a shot. And look, they have not slammed the door on this. I've been told it's unlikely that you'll see Spencer Howard, but I mean, there's a situation a week or two from now where if they're tied, with the Cubs, or if they've got a slight lead even, and they feel like he's a guy who could help them, there's nothing that says you can't call a guy up on September 15th. It doesn't have to happen on September 1st or 2nd. So they haven't slammed the door on this by any means. It's unlikely, but I think that they could take a look a week or two from now, reevaluate the situation, decide that he can help them to either pull ahead or stay ahead, and go ahead and do it then.
Hey, a couple more for Scott. I know the game's coming up here at 6:40 Eastern. You look at the Reds. The center field. Hazley's been being out there. What is Quinn's foreseeable future? It's unknown right now. I mean, he's
he's going through his rehab and he's trying to get back on the field. It's Roman Quinn, right? So, you just don't know. You don't know, like, how much time he's going to need, and you don't know how he's going to respond once he starts to ramp up physical activity. So they haven't ruled him out for the rest of the season, but I think they're going to be very conservative here because every single time that they've tried to move him a little bit more quickly on one of these rehabs, something happens. So, it's unfortunate because right before he got hurt the last time, he was starting to get hot. You could see what he could do, and he could be a very exciting player. He's just not a player that they could really count on right now, and that's too bad because, like I said, he's a difference maker when he's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, at first I was in the same boat where I can't trust this guy, and then, I mean, he kind of won me over, and right when he won me over to say, look, this guy can help you win games. His speed is such a problem. He went and got hurt again. But I think, look, Hazley's an example of what we were talking about. He's 23. I mean, nobody was like, hey, this guy's banging on the door. Why aren't you bringing him up? They brought him up, threw him out there, and he can play.
Yeah, look, they brought him up because they needed him. I mean, they brought him up in June because McCutchen got hurt and Herrera got suspended all in the span of about, 5 days. And, they had no choice. I mean, he had just gotten to AAA. They had no choice. They brought him up. And, look, I mean, I know the reaction that I got a couple of weeks ago or last month when they were in San Francisco and they sent him down in order to make room on the roster, I think, at the time for Jay Bruce to come back. I got emails from people and tweets from people saying, why Hazley? Why would they send him down? He's starting to hit. This was a young player who people were excited about. So, I mean, that's sort of what happens when you get a young, homegrown guy who comes up. And what I mean by it's like an injection of energy. It's like a little bit of a boost, and sometimes you get that and it works out. And other times the guy comes up and he's overmatched and he's got to go back to the minors. But, Hazley's a good example of a guy that I think fans fell for pretty quickly because he came up and proved that, he didn't look overmatched. He looked like he belonged. And I wouldn't say he set the world on fire here by any stretch, but he's out there playing center field every day and he's not hurting them. So, I mean, I think that there's, that's the argument for why you would call a guy up in a situation like this in a pennant race down the stretch.
Yeah, no, I like him. And then last thing for Scott here, there's Dickerson, who has I don't know where they'd be without this guy and what he's doing. And obviously, he has been a big part of this offense. I mean, this guy has hit first, he's hitting third, he hits eighth. I mean, they move up and down. It seems that he just constantly keeps hitting for this team. And I know everybody's going to ask at the end of the year, what are they going to do with him? But they've really got a lot from Corey Dickerson.
Yeah, they have. I mean, they got a really good hitter kind of off the scrap heap from the Pirates. And I've watched him for a while. I mean, I remember him when he was in Tampa playing in the American League East, and I thought he was a good hitter then. He's probably a better hitter now. And it is going to be interesting to see what happens at the end of the season because I'm sure Corey Dickerson's going to want to play every day and go to a situation where he's going to be a regular, be it a left fielder or, I mean, I guess he can play center field. He's really mostly a left fielder at this point. But, you wouldn't imagine the Phillies would have that opportunity for him with McCutchen coming back and, Harper's going to start every day in right field. They've got, certainly questions in center field. Do they move on from Herrera? Does Kingery end up being their center fielder or do they keep him on the infield? Does he do a little bit of both? So center field is up in the air and it's a bit of a question. I guess McCutchen could go back to center field, although I think at this point in his career coming off the injury, that's probably going to be unlikely. So I don't know that Dickerson necessarily fits as an everyday player. You'd love him as a fourth outfielder, right? But I don't really know. I mean, Jay Bruce is also going to be under contract next year. So once the outfield picture gets back and healthy again, they're going to have a surplus. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. It'll be interesting if they try to trade him, if they try to fit him in somehow. But you're right. He's been, kind of a godsend for them when you think about all they've gone through. He's been an everyday guy and a guy who's been productive in the top half of the lineup. And, they're going to look for him to continue to hit here. I mentioned Harper, Hoskins, and Real Muto getting hot at the same time. Kingery's been hot. If they could get Dickerson going, that's 5 guys right at the top that, you like your chances with an offense like that. So he's been good, and it'll be interesting to see how he fits going forward.
Yeah, and then, of course, Real Muto, real fast. I mean, they're going to sign this guy, right? I mean, he's been as valuable as anybody behind the plate, and he hits. I mean, they don't let him walk away, do they? I
wouldn't think so. I mean, I really wouldn't. I think that he's proven that, he's proven that he can handle Philadelphia. He's proven that he's every bit. Look, when they traded for him, they said we got the best catcher in baseball, and I don't think he's done anything this year to diminish that opinion in their eyes that he's the best catcher in baseball. And you don't trade Sixto Sanchez to get him if you're going to keep him for only 2 years. So, I've looked at this pretty carefully, and I'm sure we'll have time to talk about this as the offseason gets underway. But there's really not a great comp for Real Muto as far as a catcher at his age doing what he's doing to sign a long-term deal. I'm sure they're looking for one. I'm sure both sides are looking for something to kind of come at this with, as far as where he'll fall on the salary spectrum and on the contract spectrum. But I would think they're going to make every effort that they can to keep him and build around him and Harper and Hoskins as the years go by.
All right, Scott Lauber, the Phillies, of course, from the Inquirer, at Scott Lauber on Twitter. Down the stretch they come, 2.5 back, trying to get 4 straight. This would be 4 in a row. They finally got 7 games over 500, a number that just couldn't get over. We'll see if they can get 4 in a row and 8 games over when they play the Reds tonight. Aaron Nola gets the start for the Phils. Scott, always a pleasure, pal. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mike. Talk to you soon.
And Scott Lauber, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.